listening to I Am Refocused Radio with your host, Shamaya Reed. This show is designed to inspire you to live your purpose and regain your focus. And now, here's your host, Shamaya Reed.
Hey, welcome to I Am Refocused Radio. We are here once again, and just like any other day, we have another show lineup for y'all. We have a special guest. He is an author, school leader, teacher, consultant, and coach, Jeffrey Benson. He has a new book that we're going to be talking about today, but before we do that, we will get to know about him a little bit further. But the title of the book, just a mental note, is Hacking School Discipline Together, 10 Ways to Create a Culture of Empathy and Responsibility and Using Schoolwide Restorative Justice, Hacking Learning Series. First and foremost, thanks for your time, Jeffrey. How are you doing today?
Great. It's a pleasure to be here. Good to be here.
Appreciate your time. I kind of gave a little preview of you being a author, school leader, and teacher, consultant, and coach. Kind of paint the picture for the audience of what inspired you to be a teacher, man.
It's a great question. There's a notion that in education, we've all had a teacher who made a tremendous difference in our lives. And in some ways, we wanted to bring that to other kids. So I had 2 or 3 through my grade school years, and then one in college, who so moved me and influenced me and were such a counterbalance to my family, which wasn't so supportive, that I knew I could bring that to other kids. And that was the beginning of my career. There's then a subsequent line that those of us who you become a teacher because you want to inspire kids the way a teacher inspired you, and you become a school leader because you're sure you could do it as well as the people who are, bossing you around. So I was also true about that. I felt that I had a better vision of what schools could be like and how kids and families and faculty in particular could be treated with more respect and support. And so that brought me to being a school leader. And so I was lucky as well that for a large part of my career, and this was just a lucky situation as well as my intention, I was able to teach part-time while I still was the school leader. And so I never wanted to forget how hard and complicated it is to teach while I was still being a school leader. So I couldn't ask people to do things in their classes if I couldn't figure out how to do it in mine. So did that for many, many, many years. I think it's been about 14 years now. I left to consult and coach and write. I didn't have enough time when I was a school leader or a teacher to write, as is the case with many of us. So since I left, which was 14 years ago, I had 6 books and innumerable articles because I just had 40 years of stories I had to get out there.
When you look at education, that's been probably a very hot topic since during COVID and after COVID. It's been in the spotlight for a while. Before we dive into your book,
sure.
You as an educator, what's some of the things that you see that we can do better as far as supporting our teachers and also supporting our students?
Yeah, well, one of the things we learned coming back from the pandemic was that the degree to which kids had not developed in predictable ways. Kids certainly develop when they're with their families and their communities, but they hadn't developed collectively. There's a certain kind of set of developmental tasks you do with your peers. And our kids didn't have enough of that. And so coming back from COVID, one of the things we saw was that we needed to pay way more attention to the kids, sort of all the developmental tasks they needed to do, not just the fact that they had fallen behind a little in standard curriculum stuff, but they also needed more time to be with each other and to take the stress of being in school a whole day and to have these things called homeworks and to sitting in a desk in a certain way all day and to lining up and all of the regiment of school the kids were not ready for. And it turns out that throughout all the years of school before the pandemic, there have been kids who haven't been ready for it and who needed more supports. And now it's just become a little clearer that we've needed to do that more explicitly than we've ever needed to do. Pandemic, in terms of kids' development, isn't quite over yet. I would say another year, and we'll see hopefully some stability in what we can expect in terms of the kids being predictable for the way we knew kids to be. But for teachers, similarly, they went through a lot of changes. and had a lot of hard work. And they came back to work, and everyone wanted teachers, and I'm sure most of the teachers out here will be nodding vigorously in this, to do exactly what had been done before, as if there hadn't been a pandemic, or in some cases to pick up the pace with the curriculum because the kids might have fallen behind. And that was the last thing we needed to do, was to pressure the teachers to pressure the kids to catch up. I'm still seeing that in schools where teachers are just tired from trying to do so much and catch up so much. Like I said, I think we're near the end of the sort of PTSD from the pandemic, but not done yet. Not done yet. So the lessons from it is that we should always be more explicit about the supports teachers and kids need in school to do well.
Once again, we're talking to our guest today, Jeffrey Benson. Go to his website, jeffreybenson.org. And we're going to talk about his book, Hacking School Discipline Together. I think that sets up what you previously just said moments ago, what we've been talking about so far, leads up to your book, because together, I mean, that's a key thing right there. You kind of need both parents, teachers, and students to kind of work hand in hand with this approach. So kind of go through the core of your book and how you came up with that title.
Sure. I'll start with how I came up with the title. There's actually a previous book. This is part of a series. And there was a previous book called Hacking School Discipline, it's a really great book, and by colleagues of mine. And it was about how teachers in classrooms can do different things so that we're not punishing kids, but we're teaching them how to do better. Their misbehavior doesn't mean that they're bad kids or, rotten to the core kids. I don't believe in that at all. But that they didn't have the tools to cope with that situation. Punishing kids doesn't give them the tools. It often leads to alienation and not feeling heard and seen and understood and cared for in school. One of the things that book didn't do was talk about how do you take a whole school and change the culture. So it's great if there are individual teachers doing restorative discipline practices in their classrooms. But how do you do it as a school? So a lot of my work, this is with having my hats of as an administrator, school leader, and a teacher, is working with schools and teams of teachers and administrators to change an entire school culture. So the book is a story about how a school does that. And I'll tell you the starting spot, and another spot where I think educators will nod vigorously, and maybe parents will even understand some of the difficulties of how schools struggle, is that oftentimes when I work with administrators, they'll say to me, I don't know why these kids have been being sent to the office for this misbehavior. This should have been something the teachers took care of. And we've seen a spike in that since the pandemic. And the administrators are feeling like, I've got a whole day's work to do, and kids are coming down for behaviors I think the teachers should have taken care of. And then I hear from the teachers, I never know when I'm really supposed to send a kid to the office. Like obviously there are really big things like fights, weapons, things like that. But short of that, if there's a kid who's being disruptive and I haven't been able to settle this kid down, when is it okay for me to send the kid out? And not necessarily be punished, just have somebody else work with the kid and see if they can de-escalate the kid. And so teachers carry this anxiety all the time. Anytime kids start to act up, misbehave, be off task or whatever, it gets to a point, will I be criticized for sending the kid to the principal, even though it was a really good decision to send the kid out of the room before the whole lesson and the whole class got disrupted? So the first spot I start with Hacking School Discipline Together is working with administrators and teachers to say, can we find the line? This is where the administration takes over and fully supports the teachers in having kids sent to them for that. And this is where the teachers have their discretion and their professional autonomy to decide how they're going to work with a kid who maybe not at that level of disruption, but still needs some attention. So that's the very first part. And I'm sad to say that most of the schools I go into, that division of responsibility is not clear. And it causes everyone stress. You're going down the hall, you're a teacher, and you see a kid running, or it's two kids starting to kind of get into it a little, not necessarily fighting, but kind of getting a little sort of, bragging in each other's faces or something. And you have to go to class. You have a whole room of kids waiting for you. What do you do in those situations? So the book looks at how we define who's responsible for what. So that's the first part. The second part is, so what do you do if you're an administrator or a teacher and a kid's been disruptive, dysregulated, acting out, misbehaving, besides just punishing them, besides just giving them suspensions or detentions? And that's where the restorative justice part and restorative discipline is so rich. And it's about, how do we help a kid understand how to behave differently in those situations, give them tools, and more importantly, or equally importantly, how do we help them get forgiven by fixing the harm? That restorative discipline is not so much what was the rule that was broken, but how do you fix the harm that you did by your misbehavior? And that is different in every situation. So if you kicked over a trash basket in class because you were frustrated, you've got to clean up the trash. And then also we'll sit with you and teach you things to do when you're that frustrated. For instance, let's say you were in recess and you got so frustrated or angry or whatever, and you broke a piece of recess equipment and you don't have enough money as a kid to buy a new piece. Maybe for a week, you'll help put away the recess equipment and you'll talk to your teachers about what to do the next time you're in recess and you're struggling. Punishment doesn't teach you those skills. Significantly, punishment doesn't let you even the score. You're always one down. You never get to the point where you've earned forgiveness if all you've done is punish. So a big part of restorative discipline is that kids earn their way back into the community through giving back. And the book is filled with all sorts of ways to do that, but ways that are coordinated through an entire school. So that's the kind of two of the main thrusts of the book.
When it comes to a collaborative, cohesive approach to discipline, how does your book also mention about fostering unity among staff members?
Nice. Well, part of the work is that all of these changes that happen in collaboration with staff and administration. The ideal way, and I've done this in schools, and it's there's a story in the book. I'll interject here for a moment. At the end of each chapter, there's an ongoing story, like a little novella through the book, in which you get to experience through meeting characters who are struggling to do what the book asks them to do. And through the book, you get to see how they talk to each other, how they collaborate, how they have conflicts, and ultimately how they come to unity. It's probably my favorite part of the book to write. So when you have a team, a task force, a committee that's doing this, one of the things you do, let's say that first task, to find the boundary between what administration does and what teachers do, you have the task force sit and do a first draft. What do we think that boundary should be? But then it isn't put into play right away. Then the task force goes out and everyone's talking to everyone in the school, getting their input. What do you think? How should this be? How should we work this? Well, here's the first draft. Can you give us feedback on that? So we have this time all the way through of public comment and feedback. Take that feedback back to the committee, and then the committee can come up with the final draft knowing that people have had voice. So in each step of the way, and you can do this as an administration by asking for that feedback. It's just so much better to have a peer-to-peer task force to do this, is that people have voice. There's a great notion in organizations that I've seen played out over and over, and also that I've felt, which is people are more likely to go along with a decision if they knew there was a robust process and that voices were heard than if they just liked the decision. So if I'm a teacher and I know that my peers have been consulted and I've had a chance to be consulted and people have talked through this, I'm going to say, okay, they probably did a good job because the right people around the table and the voices were heard. But if all I'm getting told is here's the rules, I might like those rules, but I'm already skeptical about whether this has been fully vetted and who talked about it. So going back to your question about unity, it's all about an ongoing process of feedback, of asking for feedback, of doing multiple drafts. And then another part is that you do test runs. So we have a new procedure for end of class dismissal, for instance. So instead of saying, okay, here's it, here's the rule, we've handed it down, now everyone do it this way. First, people have had their input on how to do an end of class dismissal so it's less disruptive, so fewer kids get in trouble. And then we do a test run for a month. We get feedback from everybody. Did we make it better? How do we make it better? So test runs are as well a big part of this. So there's this ongoing richness of communication. One of my favorite parts about this is not just that we make for the students a culture in which they're restored more than punished, but it's also about we as the adults feeling connected to each other. And I think the very last line in the book is, let's restore ourselves. Schools can often feel very siloed. And knowing that you have a task force and a team that are collaboratively working to make something really important in the school go better is a huge step towards staff unity, as well as a blueprint for your next initiative. We could do this on school discipline. Can we do this on a parent night initiative? Can we do this on reading? We learn how to do this collaboratively.
Once again, listen on Refocus Radio, talking to our guest, Jeffrey Benson. You can go get a copy of the book that we're talking about, Hacking School Discipline Together, on Amazon, and also visit his website, jeffreybenson.org. And continuing this further when it comes to overcoming resistance to change, because that can be students, that can be parents, or that can be teachers. And with the idea of everyone having better communication, that part is key, because once a link in that chain gets disrupted, the whole chain suffers. It's not just that link that suffers. So dealing with resistance to change, because it can be difficult probably for some who are stuck in their ways, or they just feel like it's y'all's job, or is, pointing the finger at someone else. What are some of the strategies in the book that you show to overcome those resistance?
So it's really interesting. First, yes, I one of the things I speak about in the book and in my work in schools, I think people are wise to be resistant to change. Schools have seen so many initiatives imposed on them, and even imposed by people, I'm going to say, who with the best of intentions. But you're coming down from some hierarchy somewhere at the state level, or the federal level, or the textbook manufacturers, or the school committee, or somewhere, and there you're the teacher, and you've seen them come and go. I think it's okay to be resistant. I think we should appreciate that resistance is not always about, I don't want change. It's about, is this going to sustain? So one of the ways recommended in the book and in my work, and I do this with teachers, I was just thinking about a principal I was talking to the other day about this, is to lay out a 1 to 2 year plan to say, we're not doing this overnight. We're going to do this in this gradual way. Here's all the spots in which you will have feedback. Here's all the spots we're anticipating doing test runs. It's not going to happen overnight. We're going to roll it out over the course of a year or even 2 years until we come to some decisions that we found the best path. Again, not only not getting feedback, but not knowing the roadmap of an initiative is one of the failures we do in all organizations, to let people know where they will have voice. In schools in particular, teaching is such a complex task to do. As being an administrator, I want to have my administrator hat on, do there for a moment. It's so complex, and you learn how to do so many different things that a new initiative comes along, and basically it's what it says to you is, whatever you felt like you were competent in, we're going to make you incompetent for a while. Who wants to feel that way? You knew how to teach math. Maybe you weren't great at it. Here they come with a new textbook. Do this textbook. You're going to be incompetent because the first time you do any new curriculum, you're going to be incompetent. So one of the keys to doing school initiatives, and we need to do this better in all ways, is to assure staff that we're not going to make them feel incompetent by just giving them too much to do at once. So having a plan that rolls out gradually, where people can see they have voice, where they have time, where they have peers to talk to, super important. One of the other parts of doing this well is to have peers to modeling of it, to try it first. So often it's the people on the task force, but if you don't have a task force, you can get some volunteers who will do it and then can report to their peers, I've done this, it works well, it works in this school. And that's another piece. I think all school reform is a building by building effort. Every school building has different geography, different geometry, different demographics of families and kids, different community resources, different playing fields, different hallways. Just the nitty gritty is so different. You can't impose a school change totally from one school to another, or you have to let each school grow its own process and to let the staff in that school model and try things so they can say to each other, this works in our school. And that's one of the reasons there's so much resistance. So I think we should be more appreciative. I'll say one more thing about that. I could say two more. I'll say at least one more. In most schools I work in, let's say there are 100 faculty, and we're going to do the restorative discipline initiative. There are probably 20 faculty out of that 100 who are gung-ho for this right off the bat. And they've heard about it. They want to do it. They often sign up to be on the committees or the task force. Then there are about like 40 teachers out of 100 who, if this is going to work, they're going to be up for it. They've heard a little about it. They're not on board yet. They're willing to listen. They'll do it if their peers think it's good. They're not fully satisfied with what we're already doing. They're just not first adopters. But if they see that it's working, they're going to climb on board. Way down at the end, there are probably 10 faculty members who are not going to do this. It's just, for whatever reasons, personal, professional, they're not going to get on board. And what we often do is we spend all our time worrying about those 10 people in doing an initiative. And my wisdom from doing all this work is our job on task forces or as principals or whomever is to get those next 40 people on board. And don't worry about the last 10. Sometimes you have to worry about the last 10 if they have a little influence and you have to figure out how to marginalize them or co-opt them or pull them in. But mostly don't worry about them. Most people actually want schools to do better as long as they see that there's voice and a plan and they won't be overwhelmed and that their peers are part of that plan.
And with all that said, out there, it's been I think it's been stated numerous of times, they want the best for their students. They want to make sure that students are coming home and they learn something. They can see the growth themselves of progress of that student. And to your point, every school is different. Every situation is different. It can't be cookie cut. It has to be tailor made to the situation of that city, of that, area. With that, when it comes to sustaining the restorative practices based on your book and your knowledge and your experience, what are some of the mindset, strategy, systems that you have seen develop where this restoring process of hacking this discipline together seems to work and start to see the tide turn?
Nice thought. So part of it is that you need an ongoing commitment to it. So it's like the third year and fourth year of the plan. If the first year is doing all of the building of the plan and the second year is rolling out the full plan through the whole year so that by the end of the second year, it's part of the culture. It's people are doing it. The third and fourth year is maintaining a group of people who become in-school mentors so that there's a place to go if you're a faculty member and you're struggling with a student. And you don't always want to go to your boss for any of a number of reasons. Or you can't always get an appointment quickly enough that there's a group of teachers, staff members, it doesn't always have to be teachers, who are assigned to be mentors. And they do outreach and they have a website, their emails are known. And if you're having a discipline problem and you're struggling with the restorative practices, those people come and support you. And they'll come quickly because they're your peers. And they know what it's like to feel sort of stuck with a problem and not be able to get it fixed. This is another thing about initiatives. Getting them off the ground is one thing. Sustaining them is another thing. So you have to build in ongoing support and to make it part of your school mantra. In this school, we do restorative discipline. So when you hire new people, that's what they hear in the orientation. In this school, we do restorative discipline. When you come into the school building, it's very clear whether there's a sign in the hallway or whether it's the very front of the handbook. In this school, we do restorative discipline. So everyone who comes in asks the question, how are we going to do that? And then you have this ongoing task force who orient new people to it and supply support. Without ongoing support, everything drifts back. We have those 100 staff people in the school, probably 95 of them have been in schools that had no restorative discipline practices. It's new to them. And so without ongoing support, people drift back to what they're comfortable with. And I don't blame them for that. I think we as school leaders in this case have to be on top of thinking of this. There's a notion in organizational change, I certainly know for schools, it's a 3 to 5 year process to change a school culture. The fact that we get the restorative discipline structures in place, routines in place, lines of responsibility in place, that's a great, huge first step. That's a couple of years till you can say, okay, everyone in the school is on board and doing it. Then you need a couple more years of making sure you have mentors and coaches and a support system until 3 and 4 years down the road, you walk through the school and you can say, we do restorative discipline.
Last question I have for you, talking to Jeffrey Benson, real quick, on your website, jeffreybenson.org, you have services that you provide. Real quickly, if you can, what some services that professionals can reach out to you, schools, principals can reach out to you to get some consulting before they can see if they can be a good fit with your services?
Oh, thank you for that. So I have a handful of things I've done because I've been doing this work a long time. So one is specifically about doing restorative discipline initiatives and helping people facilitate them. I do a lot of work facilitating other school change work because it's just sometimes helpful to have someone who's not fully in the school who can step back and provide some guidance and wisdom for how schools change and give people some perspective. So, like, for instance, in one school, helping the elementary teachers as a task force rethink the entire district's elementary school schedule, which is a big piece of work to do. In another district, I was working with a task force. 2 schools had to merge because one school was closing. And how do you help people? How do you get 2 faculties to merge together? And what are the steps of change? So I do that. I do a lot of work around social emotional learning in schools, in particular, how to integrate it so it's not another curriculum, because teachers don't need another curriculum, but how do you integrate it into your lesson plans? And there's a lot of work about that. It was my prior book to the Hacking School Discipline Together book. We don't need to have social emotional learning be a separate curriculum. So I do a lot of work around that. And then a huge part of my work through the years has been about working with kids who are really challenging and how to help teachers hang in with them and how to help us know strategies for supporting kids as they go through the herky-jerky development that kids go through sometimes. I do a lot of work generally then around inclusion practices as well. So a bunch of things. I always say the big tagline is, how do we help schools be more successful with more kids? And that without making the teachers crazy. That's the other part. How do we do it without driving the staff crazy?
With all that said, we've been talking to our guest today, Jeffrey Benson. Make sure you get a copy of his book. You can get it on Amazon. It's Hacking School Discipline Together, 10 Ways to Create a Culture of Empathy and Responsibility Using Schoolwide Restorative Justice Hacking Learning Series. You can get that, or you go visit to his website, check out all the coaching, consulting, and services he has at jeffreybenson.org. Once again, Jeffrey, thank you for your time.
Hey, thank you. This was great. Much appreciated.